Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /Entitled People, where people seem to think the world's about them and nobody else matters. And in today's episode, it's all about entitled teachers, and OP tells a story about the time a teacher won't stop spanking her brother, guys, and she learns a lesson she won't forget. Guys, I hope you enjoy the stories today. Don't shake your heads too hard. And as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So this is an old story that my dad told me in the mid-90s from his friend who was a firefighter. Karen worked as a headmistress at a primary school in North London. This school was next to a very busy road that at the time a lot of idiots would speed past without a care in the world. There had been many complaints from parents and teachers to the city, which were of course ignored. One day, a car driving twice the speed limit lost control and it crashed into a parked car. The car then struck a child outside the school, and the child was seriously injured but did eventually make a full recovery. But this event inspired Karen to stage a protest by blocking the road. She got full support from the parents and staff, so for the whole day, they stood in the road, not allowing any vehicle to pass. While this was happening, a fire had broken out in a high-rise apartment. The local firefighters needed a specialized fire engine with a long crane in order to reach the people trapped inside. But unfortunately, the quickest way there was through the street Karen was blocking. The truck was trapped in the traffic and couldn't get out unless Karen unblocked the road. But no matter how much the fire crew demanded and begged, Karen refused to let anyone through. Her reason was, a child almost died here. Apparently, she said this sentence repeatedly, even to the police when they threatened her with arrest. The fire crew were held up for over 30 minutes until they got the call on the radio that they were no longer needed. 3 people lost their lives that day. The fireman in charge was so pissed that he stormed over to Karen and demanded her to move the roadblock. Once again, Karen refused, stating a child nearly lost his life here. The fireman then interrupted her and he shouts in her face, "People lost their lives because of you. I hope you sleep well tonight because your actions cost people their lives." It's at that point, Karen then opens the road and she stopped the protest. But later that day, that fireman who chewed her out received an official complaint from Karen for trying to blame her for the incompetence of the fire service. Now, unfortunately, I have no information about Karen or if she got arrested or sued, but nothing came of her complaint to the firemen. Honestly, guys, I thought that post was already bad enough before Karen made a complaint. But holy, imagine that. Entitled people mentality. Nothing can be my fault. People didn't lose lives because I blocked traffic. People lost lives because emergency crews are useless. Like the audacity of some people, right? And I get it, okay? People protest, all the power to you. But when I see videos on the internet of people blocking the roads, sitting in the roads, refusing to move, it honestly makes me so mad, guys. And in this case, not letting emergency crews pass should be considered a criminal act. Like Karen should have been handcuffed on the spot. So this happened to my brother. Every so often, my mom and brother talk about it and they have a good laugh. So I thought it was time I shared with you. Now, this happened in the South, way back in the 80s when he was in kindergarten. School had just started. However, the poor kid got sick on something and he missed the first week of school. He also missed out on some of the rules, as well as what punishment they'll get if they disobey. Now, all of this happened on the second week of school, which would be my brother's first week there. On Monday, they had cookies. At my brother's old preschool, each child was allowed to have 3 cookies. So he took 3. It turns out, though, that they only allow 2 at a time. As a result, the teacher took a paddle and she used it on my brother's tush. And yes, they got away with it back then. And no, the teacher didn't explain why she did it. She expected my brother to know, and this wasn't a little tap either. He told us it was hard enough for his butt to sting until the end of the day. Of course, my mom was furious and she storms into the teacher's classroom. That's when the teacher told my mom that this is the punishment if they break rules. And in her class, rules are taken very seriously. My mother told her right then and there that she did not want my brother to be spanked, especially over cookies, which he didn't know the rules of. Well, the teacher wasn't going to apologize, but she went over the rules again. The next day, she was teaching them how to tie shoelaces. She showed them her way, but my bro did it the way my dad and his uncles taught him. And she didn't want him to learn his father's way. She wanted him to learn the right way, aka her way. Well, my brother couldn't do it the right way. He was so used to doing it Dad's way, and you guessed it, he was spanked again. So my mom confronted the teacher again, but seeing that the witch wouldn't listen to her, she went right to the principal. She told him that she told the teacher not to spank my brother. The principal didn't really take either side. He told my mom that my brother should have listened to the teacher, and also told the teacher that she needs to put him in the corner from then on out. Well, on Wednesday, my brother didn't put the toys away correctly, and he got spanked again. This time, my mom threatened to call whoever she had to call to get this to stop. 3 days in a row, she had told the teacher to not spank her son, and 3 days in a row, that woman spanked her son. My mom wasn't going to stand it anymore, and she threatens a lawsuit. Mom had a meeting with the principal and the teacher, and this is how it went. The teacher, holding the paddle to the principal, tells them this barely hurts them at all. I don't even spank them that hard. My mom was angry at that point, and she screams, "Let me see that." My mom then takes the paddle, looks it over, and she spanks the teacher with it. The teacher gave a shriek, and she leapt away from my mother. To which my mom said, mockingly, "But this barely hurt you. Why'd you react like that?" Long story short, my mom got kicked out of the school, but she wasn't banned. According to her, the principal was choking back laughter, and he tried to keep it professional. My mom told them that if they hurt her kid again, she will call the police on the teacher. Well, on Thursday, the teacher called my mom's bluff, and she spanks my brother again. And my mom called the cops on her. But back then, this is what the schools did, and the teacher did not get into any trouble. However, other parents did stand up against her and made it known to her and the principal and the rest of the staff that no one's allowed to paddle them or whatever. The teacher did try to spank my brother on numerous other occasions, but the other kids in class stood up for him. And then somebody stole the paddle and she couldn't find it. She did buy another one though, and she still spanked kids until the parents agreed with my mom that they didn't want this for their kids. So by the end of the first semester, the teacher was forced to retire that damn thing. Holy moly, were things different back then, guys. And the fact that the teacher kept paddling Opie's brother even after mom was like, "Hey, cut it out," is absolutely wild. And guys, I have no idea what it was like back then with teachers getting to discipline kids like that, but I can't see too many parents being happy about it. Especially when there were probably teachers who were a little bit too paddle happy and enjoyed it very much. This person comments, "When my mom was at school in the 80s, the teacher did the exact same thing. My uncle went to the school and he broke the paddle in half. They left my mom alone after that." Guys, let me know though, if you went to school in the 80s or even earlier than that, or had parents who did, let me know what that was like. I'm very curious. So I've dealt with my fair share of entitled people, both in school and at work, and I have so many stories to tell, but this one I remember so vividly. For some context, my mom was in and out of the hospital when I was around 10 to 13 years old because of a bipolar disorder. And by the time this all went down, when I was 15, my mom was doing better. She was home and she was even working. So in my final year of secondary school, one of my teachers began pulling me out of class in the middle of lessons. And at first, she just wanted to chat about my grades, which were average. But then she starts asking me more and more intrusive questions about my mom, my home life, and her illness. She then began comparing my mother's illness to her mother's, who apparently had suffered from the same thing, and she began telling me sob stories about her childhood. It was really uncomfortable for me. She also began asking me uncomfortable questions about my home life. I didn't say much, I just sat there feeling very confused about it all. This happened over the course of 3 months, and eventually I got really sick of her just pulling me out of the classroom in the middle of lessons, and I snapped. I told her to stop pulling me out of classes and to leave me alone. I then turned to leave to go back to class, and that's when she grabs me by the arm, and she tells me if I continue to withhold information, she'll have no choice but to call CPS to get me in trouble. I told her to call Child Protective Services. They wouldn't find anything and she'd be wasting their time. Well, a few days later, I get called out of the classroom, not by her, but by the principal, who takes me to her office where a CPS worker, my mom, and my dad is waiting. I realize I knew the woman. She was at our house sometimes while my mom was ill. The CPS worker, my parents, and I talked. and she came to the conclusion that everything was fine, but I broke down in tears because the whole situation was really stressful. My parents were pissed. They demanded to know why the hell this teacher thought it was okay to harass me about something that was none of her business. We never did get a proper answer, and the teacher refused to say anything. She stared daggers at me though. The CPS lady was also angry about having her time wasted, and she demanded some type of action from the principal. The teacher was not allowed to be in a room alone with me anymore, and under no circumstances take me out of the classroom alone. Eventually, she was moved to another class, and later fired for harassment and assault of another student. Yeah, after reading that, I'm not surprised at all, guys, and I think we can all agree that the teacher was using OP for like emotional support or something. And she definitely had some issues, especially if she was essentially blackmailing OP with calling CPS for not sharing about her home life. And honestly, thank goodness OP refused to put up with it any longer, and it led to the teacher losing her job over this. I'm a type 1 diabetic. I'm very small, literally never in trouble. I'm also quiet and reserved, and I barely spoke in high school thanks to anxiety. With that said, this Karen teacher taught biology class, and one day we happened to be discussing inherited disorders. She naturally brought me up, much to my dismay, saying since I'm diabetic, one of my parents had to be as well. This is incorrect, and I proceeded to tell her that. I say to her, actually Miss G, I asked my endocrinologist and he says it's not always genetic, but can have a higher risk of transfer if a parent is diabetic. And neither of my parents are diabetic. Hearing me say that, I could see her turning red and getting angry. This made her very upset because apparently I tried to embarrass her in her classroom. I was just trying to give correct information. She then says to me, well, then you must be adopted because you're wrong. You have to have a diabetic parent, so maybe ask your mom about that one. And hearing that, my jaw drops. I was angry she even said that, so I say, sure, I'll call her right now, let me use the phone. She didn't want to back down, so she even let me, telling me that my mom's gonna admit that either she or my dad have diabetes, and they've been hiding it from me. My mom is not to be messed with when it comes to me, and she's notorious for having my back against teachers. She has to bring my dad along in order to hold her back, according to mom. So here's how the conversation went. I call my mom and I say, Mom, can you come to the school? I'm okay, but... I then explain the situation to my mom. My mom tells me, go to the principal's office and stay right there, I'm on my way. I then hang up the phone and I say she's on her way and says I'm to wait in the office. See you there, Miss G. At this point, Miss G won't make eye contact, so I assume she knew a crap storm was coming, and she regretted letting me call my mother. When my mom got there, the principal calls Miss G down, and now it's me, my mom, my dad, principal, and Miss G. Well, to say things went smoothly would be a complete lie. My parents yelled, they pointed fingers, they wanted her fired. Now, that would have been an overreaction for sure, if not for the fact that I am actually adopted. My mom is my biological mom, but my dad adopted me at the age of 3 because my real dad was an abusive piece of crap. I knew the medical history of both mom and my dad, no diabetes. I never told Miss G I was adopted. I thought it would be more fun if my mom told her, loudly. My favorite thing that my mom said was, what if she didn't know she was adopted? You could have turned a child's world upside down like that. You're an idiot. Anyways, my mom forced her to apologize to me in front of my class because, quote, you embarrassed her in public by bringing up her health, so you'll apologize in public. So the post ends right there, guys, but oh man, what a mistake on Miss G's part, right? And I love how OP's mom handled that. You embarrass her in public, so you apologize to her in public. With that said though, like even if OP's condition was well known by her class, Miss G should not have brought it up and put OP on the spot like that. And she definitely shouldn't have felt like she needed to argue OP over it in front of the class like that. Like what an a-hole, right? And this person's comment sums it up perfectly. This person says, there are some good teachers, and then there's these a-holes. And guys, we love how these a-holes get taught lessons, don't we? Like this next psycho teacher. So it's been several years since this happened, and I finally feel okay telling the story. I went to a high school in a poor community, but my parents raised me to work my ass off so I could get out of there. My parents never went to college, but because of this, myself and my siblings have all gone to good schools out of state. I maintained a 4.0 until the year in question in high school. I learned to get very little sleep because the amount of work these courses required, and because my school didn't have tutoring aids or anything of the like. If you didn't understand something, tough, get to Googling. So in one of my upperclassmen years, I signed up for this advanced chemistry course. I knew it was hard, but assumed like the rest of my courses that if the class was minimally structured and Google came through per usual, I would be fine. Other students warned me to not take the course, but since I wanted to go to college for chemistry, I knew I had to go through with it. The teacher was horrible. He was notorious for being entitled and snobby. The guy was old, and he didn't offer after-class support, which was normal, but also he didn't offer in-class support. His answers to even basic questions was, "You should understand that. Pay more attention when I teach it. Talk to me about it later." But later never came. He didn't offer lunch hours, didn't offer after-school hours, and in class, he would just put up the answers, which were already available online and in the back of the book. I studied my ass off, but when the first test came back, I had a D-, with no notes to even understand what I'd done wrong. When I went to speak with him about it right after class, he simply told me to look more closely at the textbook for help, and that he didn't have time for me. He was 2 weeks behind the explanations he did give because he was constantly distracted. Now, all of this is bad, but didn't deserve him being fired yet. What did was when he got dangerous. In an experiment working with hydrochloric acid, a plug held the concentrated stuff in a tube with some magnesium and reacted to form hydrogen bubbles. Well, one of the students in my group didn't plug the thing properly, and the plug fell out, with the magnesium being stuck in the tube, now without the hydrochloric acid. So I asked him how to get the tube back, expecting him to tell us to discard the hydrochloric acid solution, rinse with water, and then start over. I had read the safety section in my textbook, which had this approach to working with acids, and my teacher's response is he insisted that I stick my ungloved hand in the solution and just grab the plug, and then, still in the solution, plug it back in. He wouldn't even put his own hand to do it, so my high school self thought that this was inherently a bad idea. I took some more magnesium from the workbench and kept adding it to the solution until it stopped reacting, eating up all the hydrochloric acid to leave water. And it just kept getting worse. Like, the guy wasn't even a teacher, he just did what he felt like doing all the time. One day, he brought in what he claimed were illegal fireworks into the classroom, and he starts setting them off. The guy thought it was funny to point them at us, wearing no safety equipment or goggles and hoodies that could have easily caught the fiery things. He would also frequently leave the room, while a group of high school kids were playing with Bunsen burners and caustic chemicals. So in combination with the total lack of education I was getting, I did not feel safe. The last contextual thing is, my high school teachers union had negotiated for tenure. After coming to college, I learned that this was a very unusual thing, and in retrospect, it's an idiotic thing. This chemistry teacher was tenured, which meant there was basically no way to fire him, thus explaining his attitude and work ethic. The guy was still teaching because he refused to retire, and he had a son going through college that he needed to pay for. But at a certain point, this was affecting my chances of getting into college. I wasn't about to let one man's issues affect the prospects for the rest of my life. So I looked up the recording laws for my state. I found out it's a one-party consent state, meaning I could legally record my teacher through audio, as long as the campus didn't say anything against it. They had zero policies. So for a month, with my grade tanking, despite hours of studying and 3-hour study books on the course, I recorded him. I recorded fireworks, his condescending tone against dumb students, him leaving us unsupervised while he took a long break. The guy literally thought he was invincible due to tenure. I then uploaded everything and emailed it to my superintendent with the ultimatum that if something wasn't done, I would email the recordings to the local news, and that I did not really want to do that. Within a day, I hear back, with her assuring me that I wouldn't be punished for ratting him out. My parents, her, and myself met. We went over my grades, my unmarked test, and the homework and videos. They asked me first to talk over my concerns with the teacher. The superintendent also said that she wouldn't tell the teacher who submitted the evidence, but they need to speak with him about the concerns to hear his side of the story. My parents and I said that was completely reasonable, as long as my name was never mentioned. So the next day, the teacher said he needed to speak with me after class, alone. I told him I couldn't as I had another course after that, and he said this was important. That's when I turned my phone's recorder on again as I had some time before the last few students left, and as I was packing up, he approaches me. Due to the shape of the classroom, I was backed into a corner, and I would have had to push this man to get out. He then starts saying that one of the students in the course had brought unfounded concerns and lies to the administration. He then said that he knew we hadn't always gotten along well, and that he hoped I wouldn't have done that to him. I lied through my teeth, and I said I didn't know what he was talking about, but he was making me uncomfortable by blocking access to the door, and I was late for my next class. And the thing is, he didn't deny what I was saying. He just said that since I clearly had a problem with him, that he would be willing to stay after class to help me specifically, since it seemed I was struggling so much, not being as smart as the other students. Again, super condescending. After that, I told him I really needed to get to my next course, and he finally moved. I then emailed the superintendent that recording during my next course, and I CC'd my parents, and my parents were furious. The superintendent was mad too. And since the district couldn't fire him, he was put on immediate permanent medical leave. While the district was still paying his full pay, they gave us one unqualified substitute after another. 2 months before the national exam for the course, they gave us a female teacher that they pulled out of retirement, but one who had actually taught advanced chemistry for years. She was a godsend and even held 8-hour Saturday classes so that we could catch up with the curriculum, at least enough to pass the class. In those 2 months, we covered just enough of the test material that our class had a 50% pass rate. The superintendent also wrote me a thank you college recommendation letter, partially to keep me quiet and partially because they've been trying to get rid of this guy for years. My little sister took the course a couple of years after me and said the new teacher was competent and they were still at that 50% pass rate. You know what? Good on OP for doing all this for their classmates' futures, but guys, I can't help but to think that the real winner here is Mr. Frickin' Entitled Teacher, who now gets to do absolutely nothing and is still paid for it. Like, was that his master plan, just to be the absolute worst teacher ever, to get placed on permanent leave? Who the heck knows? Alright, so my daughter Alexandra, 14 years old, hates any shortened version of her name. This has gone on since she was about 10. The family respects it, and she's pretty good about advocating for herself should somebody call her Lexi, Alex, etc. She also hates it when people get her name wrong, and she just wants to be called Alexandra. So with that said, she took Spanish in middle school. The teacher wanted to call all students by the Spanish version of their name, provided there was one. So she tried to call Alexandra Alejandra. Alexandra corrected her, and the teacher respected it. She had the same teacher all 3 years of middle school, so this wasn't an issue. Now, she's in high school, and she's still taking Spanish. Once again, the new teacher announced if a student had a Spanish version of their name, she would call them that. So she called Alexandra Alejandra. Alexandra corrected her, but the teacher ignored her. My daughter came home upset after the second week. And I'm not the type of mom to write emails, but I felt I had to in this case. If it matters, this teacher is not Hispanic herself, so it's not a pronunciation issue. Her argument is if these kids ever went to a Spanish-speaking country, they would be called by that name. I found this excuse a little weak, as the middle school Spanish teacher was actually Hispanic, who had come here from a Spanish-speaking country, and respected Alexandra's wishes. The teacher tried to dig her heels in, but I said if it wasn't a big deal in her eyes that she calls her Alejandra, why is it such a big deal to call her Alexandra? Eventually, the teacher gave in, and Alexandra confirmed her teacher's calling her by her proper name. My husband feels I blew this out of proportion and that Alexandra could have just sucked it up for a year, like all the other students. And he says I'm an entitled Karen, so am I the a-hole here? Guys, so I'm sharing this post because it seems to be split. Like, a lot of people are saying that OP is not the a-hole in this case, and that the teacher should respect the student's wishes. But on the other hand, a lot of people are giving the mom and Alexandra a hard time, saying she should just suck it up, like the other kids do. And the top comment on this post is, she could have put up with it, but she shouldn't have to. Good for you for having your daughter's back. Too bad your hub didn't. And this person comments against it saying, I mean, every Spanish teacher I had did this. I don't get the outrage here. Not one kid ever argued about it. Usually people just laughed. And yes, the teacher's reasoning is stupid, but it's Spanish class. They're just referring to things and people in Spanish. I don't get why such a stink was made in the first place. It still helps people in the class to understand how names translate to the other language, even though people will still call you by your preferred name. This is a weird hill to die on. There's something to be said for not taking yourself too seriously. I'm going with you are the a-hole here. But guys, let me know what you think. Like, in my opinion, it's fun. Like, learning your name can be pronounced differently in another language is super cool to me. But at the same time, if somebody just likes to be called Alexandra and Alexandra only, and it bothers them, you know, maybe just let it be. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r/entitled people. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/I don't work here lady, where a Karen demands an army sergeant's wife serve her, and she gets taught a lesson she won't forget. Guys, go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.